Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me are my fabulous co-hosts.
I'm Diana.
And I'm Jackie. Hello.
Hey, hello. Hey, everybody. Welcome to preview episode number 16, where we're going to talk about our research topics for later. But before we should do that, I should tell people what they're watching or listening to. We are a podcast where we discuss behavior analytic research for you, the listener/viewer at home, to enjoy. It's kind of like having a little journal club of pals. Imagine that you're sitting on the other side of the table and we're talking to you. You right there.
Hey, friend. That's what I would say if you were
We
here.
love ABA, don't you?
Tell me more. Astute.
Okay.
All right. So for next week, we will be talking about on-task or increasing on-task behavior of students with ADHD. So we'll be reading 3 main articles, and then we have one sort of extra article that we discuss that might be worth looking at, but is not required, I suppose. So the 3 articles are Peer-mediated reinforcement plus prompting as treatment for off-task behavior in children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder by Flood, Wilder, Flood, and Masuda from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis in 2002. Our next article is Use of Peer-mediated intervention in children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder by Grauvogel-MacAleese and Wallace from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis 2010. And Effects of White Noise on Off-Task Behavior and Academic Responding for Children with ADHD by Cook, Bradley Johnson, and Johnson from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis in 2014. And if you're interested, we will be talking about a meta-analysis of behavioral treatments for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder featured in the Clinical Psychology Review 2009 by Fabiano, Pelham Jr., Coles, Nagy, Cronus-Toscano, and O'Connor. Again, that's not one of the articles we'll be going into in depth, but we will be referring to it a bit, so might be worth giving a look-see.
I'm actually pretty impressed that you rocked all those last names.
Thank you.
Without
Thank you
even
very
a
much.
hesitation.
I do try.
It rolls off the tongue.
Absolutely.
All right, so one of the things that we wanted to do for this preview episode is talk a little bit about ADHD itself, because again, a lot of behavior analysts work in classrooms with students with ADHD, but I think a lot more work with students with other disabilities, primarily autism. Mm-hmm. So some of you listening to this may have never actually worked with a student with ADHD. So we thought we'd kind of talk a little bit about what some of the symptoms or some of the behaviors you would see with a child with ADHD diagnosis. So Diana.
Take it away?
Take it away.
Oh, okay.
Take
Great.
it away.
I didn't know if there was a question coming.
Nope.
Okay.
Take it away.
All right. So I'm using the handy internet to draw from here. I'm actually on a website for a magazine called Attitude. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it's ADDITUDEMAG.com. I have heard of it before, actually. I think in other magazines and things like that have referenced it. So I think it's pretty legit. But the criteria for a diagnosis of ADHD are similar across all the different websites that I looked at. I just landed on this one. And it's broken down into 3 main categories. So I thought I would just go over those for you guys and the listeners at home. And the first category is inattention. There are several bullet points under here that they review as potential, noteworthy behaviors to look for in ADHD, which would include fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes on work, has difficulty sustaining attention in tasks or play, does not seem to listen when spoken to directly, does not follow through on instructions or fails to finish schoolwork, chores, or workplace duties, has difficulty organizing tasks and activities, avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort, loses things necessary for tasks or activities, is easily distracted by extraneous stimuli, and may be forgetful in their daily activities.
That's very behavioral.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really is. I thought when I first looked this up that it might fall into categories of mentalism and things that weren't really observable, but
For the most part.
Pretty much all of these you could operationally define pretty easily. So there's a lot to work with here as far as thinking about things from a behavioral perspective on what we could look to make changes to. Another thing to note here, too, is that we're talking about ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but many of the things listed here are not necessarily indicative of being hyperactive, right? It's just inattention, which can certainly, some individuals with ADD or ADHD aren't necessarily hyperactive. They're just the daydreamer type, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first category. There's 3 categories. So the first one is inattention. The next one is hyperactivity. So there are several little sub points here, including fidgets with hands or feet, or squirms in seat, leaves seat in classroom or in other situations when you're expected to remain seated, runs about or climbs excessively in situations when it is inappropriate, has difficulty playing or engaging in leisure activities quietly, appears on the go or acts as if driven by a motor. That's in quotation marks.
That one's a little less behavioral.
Yeah.
That's on the checklist the doctor gives you
right
when you take your kid.
Oh, okay. That one's hard. But
and finally, talks excessively.
I think that's a lot of us.
If your child runs on gasoline, he probably has ADHD. He's going like a motor.
Yeah, I got it.
It's not a good joke. I'm just going to drink this. Sorry.
There's a dad joke right there.
It was a dad joke.
Thanks.
All right, so those fall into the hyperactive category.
Okay.
And then the final category is impulsivity. So in this category, there are only a couple things that they note. The first one is blurts out the answers before questions have been completed, may have difficulty waiting their turn, or interrupts or intrudes on others. Okay. So, thinking about these as a whole, certainly when someone is getting an ADD diagnosis, they don't have to have every single bullet point here. And one could most certainly make the argument that many young children exhibit several of these symptoms. But my understanding is that you need to have several of these red flags and in order for it to really constitute a diagnosis.
Right. And it's my understanding, too, that it has to be pervasive across context.
Yeah.
So if a student is performing poorly at school, but then can have sustained attention at home, or, vice versa, then that would not be grounds for a diagnosis.
Yeah. And I think that's been more so recently. There's really been an effort to not overdiagnose children.
I think that's great. I mean, if we're going to look at behavioral problems, we may focus on the home, but if it's not happening at school, it'd be like, okay, why isn't it happening at school? And look to see, what stimuli or consequences and continuities are in place at school that we could maybe bring to home to help facilitate home life. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Diana, for a little background information for those of you who are not familiar with working with students with ADHD.
Yeah.
So let's go into errata, which is a section we originally created based on the actual meaning of errata, which is to go over errors. But people have been mostly nice and not written us nasty emails about how we're wrong. So it's become more of our emails from listeners and, interesting topics that are raised by those emails. So if you would like to be on errata, you can email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com, or you could post to the Facebook page, facebook.com/abainsidetrack, with any thoughts or related questions you have. So this email that I will pull up momentarily came from a listener, Jeff, who wrote to me and was talking a little bit about what he's currently working on, which is in-home behavior therapy.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
If we're going to pretend that he's here, we would probably say hi to him.
Oh, okay.
We're
just keep that
keep it going. Yeah. Would you want some tea, Jeff? Here.
So Jeff writes, I think a podcast episode geared towards parent training in a natural setting would be very useful. I previously worked in a severe behavior clinic. In that clinic setting, it was easier to control the environmental variables and bring parents in when the child had already acquired the skills we were teaching. I often find in the home, it is much more chaotic, and I find myself training the parents while teaching skills. It can be quite a challenge.
Agree with you, Jeff. Yeah.
That's a really good topic.
It's very true. I mean, I think that's true for any practitioner. You read an article, you say, this sounds great. I'm going to replicate it word for word, exactly the same.
Right.
And it just goes terribly because you didn't factor in some extra transition or extra activity, or something about the space was different because you were in a real setting. And you have an idea of what to do, but the application isn't always quite as straightforward as just do what they said in the research article wherever you happen to be.
I love this. I think, Jeff, that you've hit the nail on the head. Is that a phrase?
That is a phrase.
Yes, I did it. Usually I say phrases that aren't phrases, and then everyone's like, wrong phrase. But that one I've got down. I think that will be in the next couple episodes. We will pick some articles on parent training in natural settings, and we'll talk about them. That's great. I'm real jazzed about it, actually.
Yeah, it's a great topic and one that is rife with questions and quandaries. So I think it would be really good to talk about. And one that's really applicable to probably a lot of listeners out there. Myself
Thanks, Jeff.
included.
Me too.
Yeah.
Can't wait. But you are right there that the home is definitely more chaotic and you have less control than when you're in a tightly controlled classroom. Or if you're even better yet, like a residential facility is fairly controlled. So I think we all should think about how we can make, context cues more salient in the home so that we can see more control overall.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for writing.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm pretty excited about this topic, the ADHD topic, because I think, there's a lot more, there's more students in public schools that are receiving this diagnosis, but there's not that much more training involved for teachers.
Right.
As far as I'm aware. So then, a teacher has a student in their classroom and they're not necessarily trained on procedures that may work best. They're just kind of thrown in and said, okay, do what you can do. We'll get back to you soon. And I don't necessarily think that's the best strategy for teacher morale as well as for student behavior overall.
Yeah.
And even like classroom friendships. I mean, if you have one student that's disrupting the entire class over and over again, it's going to be fairly stigmatizing for them, and they may lose friends over it. So I think this is a really good topic, and I think it's going to be beneficial for BCBAs to have more knowledge base around increasing on-task behavior, because then they can help the teachers that they're working with be more successful with those students and probably go home a lot happier, thinking that they've done a great job that day and not felt so despondent that they couldn't handle a child in their classroom.
Yeah, and these are the types of things that we end up talking about are easy modifications in the classroom, something that actually could potentially be done by someone who is supposed to be monitoring the entire class.
Right. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's an area that behavior analysis could certainly help out with.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, thanks so much for writing in, Jeff. Like I said before, if you have a question or an email that you think would bring up a relevant topic for the group, then please email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com or post on Facebook, or you can send us a message on Twitter where we're ABA Inside Track. Well, I think that does it for this week's preview episode. We've got our articles on increasing on-task behavior for students with ADHD. We have a fun kind of question to ponder in terms of thinking about how we train our not our parents, but train the parents of our students. You can train your parents.
I'm
too.
going to train my mom.
It seems hard. That seems a lot harder than
Dear
training
Mom.
other people's parents.
Yeah, it does, actually.
All right. Well,
And a conflict of interest. We can't do that according to professional code
Right.
via
That's right.
January 2016.
That's true.
That's
Guideline
true.
1.1. 1.07, actually.
Don't
I
train
think.
your
Multiple
parents?
relationships.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Don't train your parents. What about if I want to train them to make the VCR stop blinking 12? That's not a problem anymore, is it? The VCR blinking 12?
Nope,
It doesn't exist.
it doesn't. Nope.
There are many other
But I ethically
technological
cannot.
problems.
I cannot use a TA for my mother to learn to burn DVDs or to use a website to organize her pictures.
You cannot enter into an official behavior analytic
Agreement.
relationship with
Right.
someone in your own family.
But I can use my knowledge for good
Yeah,
without being paid.
sure.
Okay.
I'm behavior analyzing you right now.
Oh, guys.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning into our preview episode. We'll be back next week with a full episode. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Diana, for
Thanks, guys.
being here.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to all of you for listening, and we'll see you next week. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.